digitaljamsessions.com. Hello and welcome to this Digital Jam session. Today we're joined by Ben Johnson from Groovy and Sanj from Halcyon joins us once again. So guys, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for asking us.
Yeah, thanks so much.
So if you could start by telling me exactly where you're from and what you do. We'll start with Ben, since Ben's new to this show.
So my name is Ben Johnson. I'm from Groovy. I'm based out in Copenhagen, but I'm originally from Scotland. I've set up Groovy about 5 years ago. And Groovy is really an agency that specializes in ad technologies that move audiences around from not just being aware about, films or other forms of content, but actually through to doing something that's relevant to the brand, either booking a ticket or buying an item. And we try and track every instance of the user journey. So from the advert into the unit itself, and then through to the fulfillment section, which can either be a movie ticket, as we do for the major studios, or through to a games purchase if it's online.
And just so we've got some context, Ben, can you give us an example of a campaign that you may have worked on or some kind of example of something that you've done?
Sure. So we're retained by Disney in the German-speaking markets. We work primarily on all their film releases, and chances are if you saw anything online to do with Avengers Age of Ultron or any of the other movies they released this year, it was made by us. And that's everything from the responsive websites, landing pages for the movie, through to the timeline and Twitter players that we created in stream and in newsfeed for those films as well.
Awesome. And Sanj, why don't you remind our listeners exactly who you are and what Halcyon does?
So my name is Sanj. I'm the experiential producer at Halcyon. We are basically a digital design creative agency that specialises in new technology. We were formed as a venture startup to explore and expand the role that technology innovation can play in communicating with today's new digital consumer. We're basically a synthesis of luxury marketers, retail specialists, and cutting-edge leaders in 3D technology. We've won many awards. We mainly specialise within luxury, and some of our clients include Richemont, LVMH, Swatch Group, Kering. Give you a bit of background on me. So I started work within the music industry, developing an understanding of e-commerce and social trends within the web back in the late 90s. From there, I started to help digital startups target music industry professionals during the seismic shift of consumer habit evolution from physical products to digital. My exposure began within luxury when the head of music at Burberry approached me regarding the use of holographic technology for a show in Beijing back in 2011. That show was really successful in that I think about 120 million viewers watched it live when the show went live. And from there, I started to be approached by a lot of luxury brands that were looking to do these kind of large scale experiential events in that territory. That kind of gives you an idea of me. Some of the sort of brands that I've worked with, so some of the things I've done, I've sort of opened up the World Cup Stadium in Brasilia with the digital resurrection piece. Do quite a lot of digital resurrection. So I was part of the team that worked on the Tupac hologram at Coachella back in 2012, but also working with a lot of tracking technology. So I've worked with people like Moet Chandon, L'Oreal, and also we're starting to work with Estee Lauder.
I'm glad that you mentioned Tupac. I was going to nudge you if you didn't mention Tupac. Wonderful. So very briefly, I wanted to start out with a conversation around the shift in advertising and where this is going, because I know that Ben, you're exploring something quite new and interesting with Groovy and the platform itself, and the user experience is a very smooth experience through Facebook where users are seeing that advertising, they're clicking straight through to then book their actual tickets. So I'm interested to understand from your point of view what you think is the most significant step that's occurred in the last kind of 5 years or so around technology that has helped you to be able to deliver that smooth, streamlined experience.
Yeah, so very simply, we started Groovy with the hypothesis that the audience was moving towards social media to discuss the stories and content that they wanted to interact with. The last 5 years has largely proven that with the work that we've been doing with Groovy. It's really the growth of social technologies like Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter, and the move towards ad exchanges that can target based on interests, which is something that we find quite eye-opening. Generally, when we're involved in a campaign, we build absolutely everything for the brand. So it's everything from the banners through to the apps that we build within Facebook and Twitter. But consistently, we see those locations outperforming the traditional display advertising by, a huge order of magnitude. And I think this is where we're getting to the point where it is really the ability to drop the right content at the right time with the right buying message towards the user at a moment that, they may be interested in reviewing that content and making that decision that we're sort of working towards with these new networks.
So I know that the launch and release of behaviours on Facebook is quite recent. Is it something you've had any interaction with at this stage, Ben? Is it something that will significantly impact what you do with Groovy?
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, the new tools like Facebook's custom audiences and behaviors are just great tools for even further refining and making your campaigns even more granular in the way that they target people. I think there's, and I mentioned this on LinkedIn the other day. I mean, there was one of the marketing officers for Kraft who's being interviewed after some advertising experience. And when I first looked at Facebook's ad platform, I viewed it very much as a trading desk. When I then heard all the sort of noise in the industry about real-time bidding and the ability to use platforms to do the same thing with display media, and then I eventually ended up looking at some of these real-time bidding platforms and DSPs, they just looked exactly like Facebook, which was strange for me because I've been using Facebook's platforms for so long. So I just think all these tools are going to allow us to be much better at placing the content that we want to market in front of the user at more convenient times based on better data about that user.
So I'm interested to hear your point of view on this one, Sanj, actually, because Ben, there's a lot of what you're talking about here that some people who are not necessarily deep entrenched within this industry might consider it as a little bit Big Brother, a little bit kind of invasive in terms of we really are analysing everything you do and following you around the internet. Sanj, from your perspective, when you're developing your experiences and your experiential campaigns, to what degree are you utilising this kind of social data, this personal behavioural data?
Yeah, no, it's a very interesting question, and it's something that's brought up a lot because the kind of social responsibility of this management of data is really important. From our point of view, when it comes to technology, technology to us is an art form, and that art form needs to communicate something, needs to be the platform for the narrative. Specifically, for our clients, but also for the artists that we work for. So it's not really something that we focus on. However, there's a lot of data that's being accessed through smart devices, through how people express themselves through the Internet of Things, and that data can be used in ways to calculate what's going on, and to some people that's important, but generally speaking, within the market we work in, it's not really been a strong discussion.
Do you think it's something that will change in the future, given that what we do know about things like Facebook is that there's now suddenly this focus on VR and AR, and we know that we've got this emergence of all these headsets that are going to come in the next kind of year or so. Do you think that's going to significantly change the outlook? I kind of say that to both of you at this stage, but maybe if we start with you, Sanj, do you think it's going to change the outlook for you?
I think it's already changing the outlook. Big data is kind of been a buzzword within the industry that we work in, at least, for the last 3 years. And it's only now that it's it's starting to become a useful commodity and a very powerful commodity. I guess it really depends on what volition these companies have. A company like Facebook, a company like Google, even Apple, that kind of data is important because they can target people, or they can understand the way humans are evolving in this new digital space. And that to some people may sound intrusive, but to other people that's actually quite exciting, because it's a kind of blueprint to the evolution of our anthropology.
Okay, so Ben, what's your take on this? Obviously, you're very ingrained with Facebook, and 90% of your business kind of depends on your interactions with Facebook. What do you think the impact of things like AR and VR are going to be as you move further down the line with that?
Good question. To be honest, I'm not really sure. I think that side of the future hasn't really been properly, until there's a proper wearable solution out there. I don't think the AR side of things is really going to impact on what we're doing. I mean, basically, we take a look at a technology or a platform, and we look at the opportunity for us to try and get some kind of tool or messaging system in there that gives a user the information about this product in a way that's as friendly as possible and allows them to go off and buy. And so, our focus in terms of platforms right now outside of Facebook are things like the smart TV environments. Until there's a wearable product in our industry, I don't think there's that is selling en masse. I don't think there's anything more than the mobile strategy that we have in play today that's interesting.
So when you say wearables, obviously we've got things like the iWatch have already kind of hit. Do you not feel that there's enough penetration with the iWatch yet for it to be of significant, impact for you?
Well, I've had friends of mine that have built apps on the iWatch and made, decent cash flow out of them from the app sales that they got from the store. So but I'm really including, for my mind, the idea of a wearable is something that is actually, within your view, within your vision, like Google Glasses. I'm probably going to get slapped on the wrist, but I would treat the Apple Watch more as a mobile device.
Interesting. You have opened the can of worms. So Sanj, I want to hear your view on what you consider a wearable to be. I mean, is it something that is in our peripheral vision, or is it one of these things that actually detracts, from our line of sight? I say this as an example from my perspective. Any kind of tech that you're able to wear and does something that is functional or has an integrated approach is wearable to my mind. And examples of that are things like covert designs, Altruis, a jewelry system, which is a small gem that you can insert into a series of different types of jewelry, would be it, bracelet, necklace, ring. And that actually has a Bluetooth connection with your mobile phone and allows you to actually filter the messages and the text messages and the email messages, etc., that are coming through, so that it only alerts you of the things that are predominantly important to you. And what that allows you to do is actually remove the screen from your life versus have another screen to worry about. And to my mind, that's definitively wearable technology. But obviously, going by Ben's definition, that's not necessarily wearable technology. I'm interested to hear your take on it, Sanj.
Yeah, I mean, God, this is another podcast in itself.
You're on this podcast, make it
Yeah, I mean, wearable technology, it's been around since the pocket watch. People have been excited about anything that they can kind of apply to their everyday life. Personally, for me, the whole wearable boom at the moment is it's not very sexy. It's very rational. It's, how many beats has my heart beated? How many steps have I taken? There's nothing desirable about a device that's designed to make you slave to notifications. When time disconnected is the new luxury. Success is measured in, one's ability to switch off. So I'm just to let you know, I'm just actually reading that from GQ. It's written by a guy called Oliver Franklin, who's he's kind of a guy from my own heart, in that I think wearable technology at the moment is in a really boring and unexciting space. And the reason for that is everyone keeps trying to apply it to be useful, and none of it's beautiful, none of it's exciting, and none of it's artistic at the moment. And
no. I disagree, Sanj. I'm sorry, but I'm going to stop you right there.
It's all right.
What about Unseen? That's one of your partners. That's one of your clients.
Yeah, so I was moving towards that. So
sorry, I preempted you. Continue.
It's all right. So for us, we invested some time and resources in a brand called The Unseen, and we built this dress that it's kind of a sculpture that actually changes color depending on what you're thinking. And then when I explain this to some people, a lot of them kind of say, "Well, isn't that like global hypercolor from the early '90s?" And I'm like, "No. This is a little bit more sophisticated than that, and that it actually reads your emotions." And some people find it intrusive. Some people don't understand the usefulness of it. But in our minds, it's not about being useful. It's about instigating debate, and that's what personally I feel wearable technology should do. Otherwise, as I said before, as Oliver said, you become a slave to your notifications.
This is so true. But, the interesting thing for me with the project that you did with Unseen is this notion of material alchemy.
Yeah.
And actually taking what some people would consider more as kind of chemistry and physics, not necessarily technology per se, but creating something that is meaningful and purposeful, but also very, very beautiful. And looking at, for example, the skull cap kind of head dress piece that was done with the spinels, the gems, that actually can sense what you're feeling and know what emotions you're feeling, and show that and illustrate that in colour on the skull cap itself is a very interesting, beautiful example of using technology in a way that allows us to actually get something useful out of it, so that we can see somebody's thought process and know if they have brain damage or know if they're lying, for example. But to be able to do that in a way that isn't ugly sci-fi tech, that's all metal and hard lines, but something that actually has an eye for design and fashion and is done in a way that is actually very, very clever. We're talking about chameleon fabrics. We're talking about next generation technology in a way that isn't this huge, bulky layer of technology that gets in our way. And I'm curious as to whether or not you feel that is still something that falls in the scope of wearable, Sanj.
Yeah, no, it totally does. And I think the industry that all of us work in is actually dealing with a kind of brave new world at the moment. And there's some interesting things that are happening. And I'm sure some of those are going to have longevity. One of the things I'm particularly interested in, I don't know if you've seen the project that Google are doing with Levi's at the moment, where they're creating fabrics that you can interact with, in that you can control sound or you can control, visual media. That kind of stuff is a little bit more up my street. I mean, Google fell flat on Google Glass, which was a fantastic piece of technology. It just wasn't applied in the right way. And it became, Google Glass started to become a dirty word very quickly. But all of these mistakes that happen, a lot of people learn from those, and that's a good thing, because as Steve Jobs says, if mistakes will happen, but that's great, because that means people are making decisions.
It does mean that people are making decisions, and people are learning how to apply this technology in a meaningful way. And I think the key word for me is always meaningful, rather than something that's superfluous to need and flashy. And we tend to find that there's a lot of that kind of flashiness that happens with a lot of these campaigns where people are utilising new technology not because they should, but just because they can. And that tends to lead to things that aren't necessarily meaningful or purposeful. But aside from these very kind of next generation examples that we're using with people like Unseen, and yes, I will throw out the URL in the podcast notes. I'm curious though, from your perspective, Ben, because obviously you're not based here in the UK with us. You're based in Europe. You're over there in the kind of Nordic markets. Do you see any significant differences in terms of the cultural trends and behaviours towards technology? obviously a Google Glass isn't the kind of thing that we expect everybody to be wandering around with necessarily, but is there a particular attitude to technology in the Nordic region, do you think?
Yeah, I think there is. But I don't know, I hang out with a bunch of geeks all day, so...
So you're not influenced in any way, shape or form.
Yeah, exactly. So what I see hanging around here is I think the Nordics generally have a very strong sense of design. Having lived it here for now nearly 8 years, there are certain things that will work. And that is largely based on not just on how it looks, but how it fits within people's lives. And I would say that given the way that people respond to good technology here, it's an excellent launch market. So if a product does actually want to get early traction within Europe, it's probably a good place to start.
And is that just because you feel that the market's more open, or because of the way that people use the technology?
I think it's largely the way that the Scandinavians are brought up, to be quite honest. There's a tremendous sense of design in everything that they do, to the point where, my wife and I were looking at houses around Copenhagen for about 6 months, and eventually sort of 3 months into the project, I gave up because I only needed to see the outside of the house to know what the inside of the house would look like.
Okay.
So I do think but it is a very, it is very functional here, and it does work. I don't see the same kind of clutter in the way things are done, both from a sort of business process perspective, but also from a design and approach to products perspective. And I think it's inherently burnt into the Scandinavian psychology from a very early age.
Okay. So from your perspective, Sanj, because I know you've done a lot of business with kind of the Far East and China and what have you, do you feel that there's a significant difference in attitudes towards technology and business process in the Far East?
Do you know what? There's a significant difference of perspective and perception of technology in every territory. Whether it's the Far East, Scandinavia, Europe, and America. And I guess just like every business, we have to learn from the experiences that we have with engaging with these people to understand them. And I think that's just the nature of the world, which is a great thing.
Okay. So in your experiences, what has been the key highlight for you in doing business with China? I know that you've had some pretty standout shows over in China. Can you talk us through one of your shows in China? Yeah, so
I guess probably one of the best shows we did out there was for Alfred Dunhill, which was we basically created a hologram that was about the size of a building that looked like a snow globe that grew around 64 models who were standing on stage for the launch of a new range by Alfred Dunhill. What I like about China is that they take chances. There's a lot of opportunity to do really grandiose and very opulent extravaganzas out there, whether it's events, whether it's digital engagement. They're excited about by new things. However, there is a kind of formality of business there that needs to be understood before you go to that territory, because it's not the same as doing business in the UK or pretty much around Europe. You have to really understand the customs and the culture to deliver things out there.
Okay, so very briefly, I always ask this on every call, and I know, Sanj, you're probably very practiced by now at this, so I'm going to ask you first while Ben has a think on this. But the one thing that I would ask you is what you think is the most significant new piece of technology, new trend, cultural event or happening, whatever that thing might be, that you think is going to change the face of your industry within the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, very good question. So there's a couple of things. For Halition specifically, we're seeing a huge rise in our tracking software. And when I say tracking, I mean you stand in front of a screen, whether it's a tablet or a screen on a wall, and we engage with you, whether it's you're virtually trying on makeup or you're controlling content using gesture. We're starting to design things now where, someone will walk into a room and straight away they can control the environment around them just by walking around or gesturing certain areas around the space. So that's one thing that's big at the moment. Second thing is UX design. This is something that's been around for a while, but there is a lot of there's a high need now for more graphic designers to work on user interfaces that are going to run on tablets or screens or anything, and it's a kind of it has to be an artistic but also very user friendly and beautiful visual facade that controls the application or whatever it is that's being developed. Those are two things that I feel are going to grow in the next 5 years.
Awesome. And Ben, what about you?
It just, from our perspective, just anyone who's operating a successful social network is really looking at how to monetize that. The monetization will come in bringing in brands into the experience, and those will lead to ad networks being set up within those brands, rich media experiences being set up within those platforms as well. It just looks like a logical progression that as we see Facebook moving into this area and becoming stronger and stronger, everyone else will follow. Albeit from LinkedIn through to Reddit, through to Snapchat, Sina Weibo, WeChat, Renren, all these networks are looking to make money. And, the way you do that is by making it easy for brands to message and put their content and creative into that experience. So that's the big main change that we see that's coming. Obviously, data is obviously hugely important. And, the tracking and the ability to look at a campaign and for the first time actually really begin to be able to link it through to what is the actual effective ROI on a practice or a campaign, I think is slowly but surely coming. It will mean that the industry will become more efficient, and I think that certain practices and certain parts of the industry will begin to fall by the wayside. I think a lot more of the brand's money is going to go direct to service providers and networks, and maybe even start to bypass the agencies.
Okay. So, in closing, if you could let me know your Twitter handle, your URL, or whatever other way that you would like our lovely listeners to get in touch, follow, or stalk you. Sanj, why don't you share with us your details, even though you are by now practically a regular on this show?
So you can get me on at Halishan or at Sanj Sarati on Twitter. And you can also check out our website, www.halishan.com, which is HOLITION.
Wonderful. And Ben?
Yeah, so feel free to reach out to me at ben@groovy.tv or through my Twitter handle, which is at Project Groovy. Groovy is spelt GRUVI.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, guys, and thank you for listening. If you enjoy this content, please remember to subscribe and review. And thanks again for listening.
No worries. Thank you so much, Tanya.
Thanks, Tanya.
digitaljamsessions.com